This is the Becoming Muslim podcast at untoislam.com, the show that helps people convert to Islam with hosts from the US, UK, and Australia.
28 years ago, when I was thinking of converting, my biggest, worry was like, what is my family going to think? They're going to think I've fallen off the deep end.
Absolutely.
And how am I going to tell my parents? And, and how can I even consider myself a Muslim? Because everyone in the world thinks Muslims are crazy. And you realize, well, that's not the plan. The point was not for everyone to be Muslim, counter to a lot of Muslims might think. It's God's business who's going to go to heaven. It's not our business. God is ultimately fair, just, merciful. It's just our job to do the best while we can on this earth. And you realize it's just like anything else. Human beings, there are all kinds, and you have to forge your own way and do what you feel comfortable with between you and your God, because ultimately it's you and God. So this is a religion that is not, unfortunately, counter to what it may seem. It's not about the ritual acts as much as it is about the transformation of your soul, right, and your insides, and how you develop a loving, intimate relationship with God. When you get your bearings, because it's a huge change to adopt a new religion and convert and decide, okay, I'm going to change everything about, what I'm doing. But when you're further in and things start not making sense to you and you want to understand, okay, what is the point of all of this? And honestly, for today, for people who are thinking of converting, you got to this point because you took the time to read, you took the time, to question. If you decide to convert, or if you've newly converted, there's a new game, a new challenge, right? You have to climb a mountain just to become a Muslim. But once you become a Muslim, you've got to climb another couple of mountains to stay Muslim, stay engaged, fight, all of the stuff that's coming at you that's negative. And you have to find, what is my lifeline to sanity? And that's knowledge. And that is that's the Qur'an. I think honestly, it's like as I said, God chooses people to convert. It's a gift. I mean, to me, it's like the greatest gift I was ever given. The best advice I could give for anyone starting out is trust your heart and trust your instinct. All of that stuff is, it's suspect, right? So you just... I think that the most important thing is to build a relationship with God, talk to God, pray, make God your intimate partner and friend, like your best friend in everything.
Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings be upon you. I hope you have been well. Welcome back to Becoming Muslim, one of the many support tools we offer converts via ontoislam.com. If you have a question or are curious about any convert-related matters, we likely have a podcast, an article, or live person that can help illuminate the path back to God and your true nature, Islam. Today, we are so blessed to have Grace Song back as our guest speaker. She has been on the show twice before to tell about her convert story and struggles along the way. She is a convert of 28 years and the executive director of the Usuli Institute, a research and education-based think tank whose aim is to reclaim and reaffirm the beauty and wisdom of the Qur'an in Islam. Grace, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
It is our pleasure. So, one of my favorite quotes from the Usuli Institute website is, "The Quran does lead to a straight path, but it is not narrow." As converts, we sometimes start on this path to Islam, and it seems as if we are walking a tightrope. But the more we read, as is our first command, the wider that path becomes. This is a common theme and thread in convert stories. In your own conversion story, there were points where you said you were confused or conflicted by some of the information you got from Muslims about how to be a quote-unquote good Muslim. Briefly, would you care to share a few examples and how this contributed to the founding of the Usuli Institute?
Sure. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. When I came to Islam, I came through books, and so I was really just blown away with the ideas and the beauty of the message, and honestly, like how intuitive the message was. I think that was the most shocking thing for me, was to read about the tenets of the faith and the humanity. It's just everything that you understand about being a good person and what you should do and being kind and those kinds of things. And I think that what was shocking to me was when I entered sort of the mosque for the first time after I converted, and I was confused because I had a lot of questions. Obviously, I think as a convert, you just genuinely have a lot of questions, and everything sort of comes through the filter of your intellect and understanding, like, okay, why does this make sense? Why do we do this? Why do we not do that? And I found that, unfortunately, for a lot of different reasons, now that I understand 28 years in, the mosque is not a wonderful place for asking a lot of these kinds of questions. And there are a lot of, underlying assumptions about, how, for example, women should act or converts should be, or, there are just a lot of ritualistic things that people do, and they don't get very excited about answering, questions about things. And so that confused me. And, so I think that it took a while, when you convert, everything is new, and you're just kind of trying to get your bearings. And so there was just a lot of stuff that didn't match up to what I had come to through books. And so I kind of struggled for a bit, for a year, coming in and out, at trying to just make, sense of things. And then I met my husband, and who was a scholar, and this is sort of like the start of our journey with the eventual founding of the Usuli Institute. But the point that I think was really important to take away is just the importance of knowledge and expanding your understanding through not people but books and reflection and developing your relationship with God. Knowledge is really, when you understand in the Islamic tradition, just the high value of knowledge, you really understand why, because your road does really widen, whatever intellectual shackles you may have or baggage, all of that stuff gets undone with, when you replace it with good knowledge. And, and that takes work, takes investment, and time. And honestly, for today, for people who are thinking of converting, you got to this point because you took the time to read, you took the time, to question, and that has to continue, through your entire journey. So the Usuli Institute, came like, 25 years after, about 20 years, after my conversion, my husband is a scholar of Islam. And so we've, been doing this work in terms of publication, research, education for many, many years. It's what we've always done. And we decided to create a nonprofit institute to try and elevate that and elevate the work that we do. And also, bring more people into the work that we're doing. But the whole focus has really been to elevate reason, thinking, critical thinking, beauty, all of the things that make, I think, Islam humanistic and elevating and enlightening for human beings. And I think, and also to really fight the negative tide of Islamophobia these days. And maybe we can have a separate conversation about that. But, truly, I think as a convert, as a human being, even not just a convert, your protection in the world is always to develop your knowledge, to to use that intellect that God gave you to read, to challenge yourself, to challenge the world, and question, how do we make the world a better place? How do we make it more moral, more ethical? What's my role in this? What's my purpose? Why am I here? And how can I serve God with the gifts that God gave me? And that's really what we've been trying to teach. How do I build my relationship with God, and elevate knowledge in the process?
Inshallah. That's beautiful. So the takeaway from that is to really focus on the books and the source, is what you're saying, because a lot of the time Muslims themselves, while well-meaning, may not have the knowledge or may not be able to cite the source for whatever belief they have.
Yeah, and I guess, not everyone, this is a difficult time, right? We live in the age of the internet. People want fast answers. They've stopped reading books. So it's a hard thing.
Unfortunately.
You have children, if you tell them to go read a book, they're going to just look at you and laugh and, continue with whatever they're doing, So it's, and there are many sources of knowledge. I guess the point is, to develop a discerning attitude, a critical, an attitude of critical thinking, an attitude of questioning. These are a lot of things that are really, I think, suppressed for a lot of different reasons. I mean, you can get into the history, the politics, the power dynamics of why things are the way they are. But aside, just to keep things simple, right? It's important as a human being to be engaged with your world and to be engaged with knowledge and to always be exploring and open, right? So knowledge comes from all different ways. It could be experiential. It could be, through your relationships with people, but books certainly, and certain, you just have to be discerning about where you get your knowledge, right? I mean, now, like on the internet, the vast majority of things about Islam are wrong, or misleading, Islamophobic, and very intentionally so, because, there are a lot of people that have a lot of vested interest, financial and otherwise, in seeing that Islam is not portrayed in its intended beautiful way. But if you understand in your heart that Islam is a message from, our divine, maker, our creator, who wants for human beings to be elevated and beautiful and at the forefront of everything good, that has to drive you as a human being. And it's an active engagement. It's not a passive engagement. So, we should always be committed to searching for knowledge, searching for what is better, what is more elevated, from a human perspective. And so I think, so knowledge from all forms, but most importantly too is that relationship with God. And so while it's important, and what we're talking about here is kind of like, this is a lot, right? I mean, honestly, like when you think about converting, okay, like when I
converting,
sorry, and I have to apologize, but like 28 years ago, when I was thinking of converting, my biggest, worry was like, what is my family going to think? They're going to think I've fallen off the deep end.
Absolutely.
And how am I going to tell my parents? And, and how can I even consider myself a Muslim? Because everyone in the world thinks Muslims are crazy, so they're just going to think I'm one of those. So these are big questions. What we're talking about now is hopefully, something to seed you, if you decide to convert, or if you've newly converted, there's a new game, a new challenge, right? You have to climb a mountain just to become a Muslim. But once you become a Muslim, you've got to climb another couple of mountains to stay Muslim, stay engaged, fight, like all of the stuff that's coming at you that's negative. And you have to find, what is my lifeline to sanity? And that's knowledge. And that is like, that's the Qur'an. So this is something that, when you get your bearings, because it's a huge change to adopt a new religion and convert and decide, okay, I'm going to change everything about, what I'm doing. But when you're further in and things start not making sense to you and you want to understand, okay, what is the point of all of this? And how do I increase my understanding, increase my relationship with God, and really expand my, my level of confidence and my understanding of things? It's the Quran. The Quran has to be that center point, and it has to take a different place on stage in your life, in the life of our community, in the life of the world. And it starts by understanding. And the Quran is really hard to understand, deeply, without the help of scholars. And then you have to find the right scholars, because there are certain scholars that are going to tell you something that might not sit well with your heart or your mind. So, not to overwhelm people, but just to say, you know what, it's there for you. There's so much, and it's the key to sanity and strength and confidence and beauty, is this knowledge and this approach. And so I hope that more people, when they're ready, and interested in digging deep and, investing time and energy, that's what we're doing. And we have everything that we do, up on the internet, and on YouTube for free. So all of this is accessible. It just requires patience and willingness.
And I actually wanted to circle back to that part where you were talking about the hands and the feet testifying, because I was actually thinking about this recently. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law has been sick lately, and she does all these extra sunnah, and she sees it as her work now that she's retired, to do all these extra prayers, and it's wonderful and beautiful, but at the expense of her body sometimes. And so we were really sitting there thinking about this, and it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. Well, your hands and your feet are also going to testify about how you treated them. Your body is a trust from Allah. And part of the beauty of Islam is being a balanced human being. Yeah. We were told in many examples where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, pointed to that middle road. If you can, stand a couple hours in prayer at night, alhamdulillah. But if this is going to put an undue stress on you or cause you harm, in that case, why are you doing it? Allah doesn't need that from you. So I just wanted to see if the professor had run into, or yourself had run into, any scholars who have thought about it in terms of, yes, of course, your hands and feet and your eyes know what you've seen and done, but they're also a trust from Allah. So this is something they will testify to. How did you treat them?
Yeah. I mean, of course, I think, well, first, just to say, we when you start hearing things like, okay, your hands and your feet will testify against you. I mean, I guess this is a good example of like not being literal, right? I mean, like your hands are not going to develop lips and start talking, but
right.
you're, like the point is, it's a holistic view. It's like, yeah, how did you take care of your body? What did you do with the body that God gave you? Because your body is a trust, right? I mean, God gave you your body, and you have to take care of it as a trust from God. As everything else, like your money and your family, everything in your life is from God. And so, in terms of like prayer, like God doesn't need our prayer. The prayer is really for us. But I think the point is to build that relationship. And so if you're doing a ritual act because you feel that somehow that is that the act itself is what's praiseworthy, or what's that's actually not. I think I've heard the professor say many times that it's, you could end up praying like a gazillion prayers, but if it doesn't change like what's in your heart, your orientation, your actions, towards your kindness towards others. I mean, there are people who pray and then they're like mean, they're not kind, they're not generous, they're not merciful. So this is a religion that is not, unfortunately, counter to what it may seem. It's not about the ritual acts as much as it is about the transformation of your soul, right? And your insides, and how you develop a loving, intimate relationship with God, what that means for what your role is in your world, like how do you affect goodness or change, or stand up for justice, or or kind to your kids, or help take care of your neighbor, or I mean, how do you embody this this beauty,
Islam.
Divinity, right? Islam. And so it's if And again, and yes, it does include, like, how do you, if you're praying, and standing 2 hours a night, but then you're hurting, it's hurting your physical well-being, then, rationally speaking, that really doesn't make sense. But
doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, but if between you and God, if that brings you closer to God, okay, well, who am I to tell you can't do that, right? Only it's between you and God. But if you're doing this because you think God wants you to exert yourself to the point of pain, no. And then I would say, no, that's not the point, right? So
that's never been part of our Islamic tradition, whereas in, Judeo-Christian traditions, you can find the self-flagellation and all this is kind of, that's not. And I think that's also something that people coming from a Judeo-Christian background sort of take for granted at some point, and I've not heard it talked about a lot. So I think it is important to stress, while they are part of one monotheistic tradition, Islam has many different points from the beliefs and the traditions that someone from a Judeo-Christian background would be used to. And I think along my journey, that was a big awakening for me, because when you hear religion talked about these days, especially, it's just a polarized discussion. Okay, monotheistic traditions, and then, atheist or agnostic or whatever else you're going to talk about. So we kind of get grouped in with Judeo-Christians, but I really don't think that's necessarily a good reflection of where we stand,
I mean, well, we understand as Muslims that this is a continuing message, right? It started from the very beginning. So we all believe in, from Adam to, Prophet Abraham, Noah, Jesus, all the prophets in between. I mean, it's all the same God. It's all the same message. The prophets brought the same message to their people, with Judaism and Christianity, the message was not preserved as it was originally, delivered. And Muslims, when we received the message, humanity had matured, like, to a point where we were able to receive the message with the ability, one, to intellectualize it and also write it down. So, in the time of Moses and Jesus, this was the age of miracles, right? This was the age of magic and superstition. And miracles work for the people who see the miracle, but after time, it just becomes folklore, right? So, with the Islamic message, it's like God was basically saying, okay, we are moving beyond the age of the miracle. You've trust enough now. Now the Quran is your miracle, and your intellect. You have the ability now to use reason, and then this is the first time that we've actually had a revelation fully, captured and preserved. And God promised that that the Quran would be preserved over time. So humanity evolved. But that doesn't change the fact that we're all connected. It's the same message, monotheism, the same message of the prophets. And so, so you'll find so much continuation and connection. And I think it's beautiful that, I mean, for me as a convert, like, one of the things that was the most compelling was the message that, there are going to be Jews, Christians, Muslims, all kinds of people that make it to heaven. And
absolutely.
There was a space for, this answered a question for me. Well, what about all the beautiful people that are not Muslim and will never be Muslim? You realize, well, that's not the plan. The point was not for everyone to be Muslim, counter to a lot of Muslims might think. And that, it's God's business who's going to go to heaven. It's not our business. And God is ultimately fair, just, merciful. It's just our job to do the best while we can on this earth, and to follow, the divine principles, try to be godly people. And, we leave the rest to God. And so, we're human beings. And I think, God gave us an intuitive sense of what's right and what's just, even for people who never would have exposure to the Quran. You have a sense of what's right and what's wrong. It's your choice whether you pursue that or not. And I trust God will ultimately be fair and beautiful, and so inshallah.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point to make, is that, when you're listening to scholars and they don't have that humility or that preface of, well, this is what I've found, this is my scholarship, this is how I interpret this, but obviously there's room for other people.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who are very quick to assume the role of scholar and try and convince, especially converts who don't know very much, but other Muslims too. I mean, just like, oh, everything has to do with the right text, the right evidence, well, where's your proof for that? And that is really, for someone who doesn't, you're entering a space, it's very intimidating, because you're like, well, I don't know these sources. And I guess, does everybody know these sources? And is this how you claim authenticity? And, honestly, like, the best advice I could give for anyone starting out is trust your heart and trust your instinct. And, all of that stuff is, it's suspect, right? So you just, I think that the most important thing is to build a relationship with God, talk to God, pray, like, make God your intimate partner and friend, like your best friend in everything. So you're like talking to God when you're driving in the car, you're shopping, every little thing, turn to God and talk to God and invite God in. And that relationship, the more you invest in it, and a real relationship, not like God is far away and judging me, and if I don't do my prayer on time, or I don't have my hands in the right place, or I don't, if I have a hair coming out of my head, that stuff is like God, like, what's more important is the substance, like,
absolutely,
the connection, and that is what's going to carry you. And so when you come across someone telling you something and you're like, this doesn't really feel right, it doesn't sit right, then just set it aside and say, okay, I have to wait until I feel comfortable that this is something that I believe, is beautiful, that God would want, that, I mean, it's like, I think people have everything that they need to have a genuine, beautiful relationship and to know what is right from wrong. And a lot of the details that people try to confuse you with are kind of more,
minutia. It's just
sometimes it's, power games. Sometimes people trying to impress you, and it's, and it's much easier to say this now, 28 years in, right? When you're still,
right.
Like, it's like,
exactly.
Oh my God, everybody knows everything. Like, I just, every Muslim was like brilliant and knew everything. I just everyone was so much better than me. And you realize it's just like anything else, human beings, there are all kinds, and you have to forge your own way. And do what you feel comfortable with between you and your God, because ultimately it's you and God.
And I think that's important, because if you get too literalistic and if you sweat too much about the minutia, you are going to lose the beauty in the big picture. And it's hard. It is very hard to stick to. I know as a new convert, you want to be right. You want to be doing the right thing, quote unquote. But when you get to those little issues, there are a lot of right ways to do it, in my opinion, or a lot of ways to do them. There might be a better way or a best way. But God knows your heart and your intention. And I think that is one of the most powerful things about your relationship with God and the Quran, is that as long as you're intending to do the right thing, right? We're told we're given better than what we're doing. This is a basic Islamic principle. And so if you have that intention to be right, even if, your action is not 100%, let's say, Allah is going to give you what your intention was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just to start, it's really like prayer is really important, not for God, but for your own like habit making and for your own investment. Like I tell my son, it's like, this is sort of like your investment in your bank account, right, with God. And even if you don't feel it. Like a lot of times people are sort of hung up with like, oh, I don't feel anything when I pray. I pray, it didn't do anything for me. It's not, you might not feel anything for a long time, but it's habit forming, and there's a reason for it, and it will, like, the more you put in it, the more you'll get out of it, and and it's a beautiful act. It's something that you can't really describe until you've done it for a while and you understand. And even if you do it wrong, but just even like to do it, 5 times a day. And yes, it sounds like a lot, but it's really not. Just to get yourself in that practice, and then fasting the best that you can, and trying to just have God with you in your mind and everything that you do. I think leads. It's habit forming, and it's like I saw this really good quote recently about how you decide. It's not that you decide your future; it's that you decide your habits, and your habits form your future, or something like that. And
absolutely,
absolutely, really true. And so, these are really powerful ways to bring divinity into your life, and you need that, especially with how dark the world is.
Absolutely, living divinity, breathing, living, flawed as you will be, just the striving, the intention. It's the whole crux of the matter. Because you will not be the same person the first day you became a Muslim that you are on the 28th year that you are a Muslim. It's just not the way it works in life.
It's so interesting. I've found that a lot of times converts, are, extremely high IQ, high emotional IQ. There's a really strong strain of perfectionism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these are some of the things that bring people to Islam. And in addition to that, I think divine intervention, especially in this day and age, like, people often have an experience that, like, something happens where, you understand, like, okay, this was kind of a message for me. And so it's funny because, like, I mean, I fall into the, perfectionism camp where it's like, you just want to do everything right. You just want to, and
just tell me what it is and I will do it. Yes.
Exactly. And so it's like anything else, you can be, your perfectionism can paralyze you, and you just got to be
absolutely.
And, got to be patient, but do your best to just, keep going. Because the thing that's really beautiful about people who, well, I think honestly, it's like as I said, God chooses people to convert. It's a gift. I mean, to me, it's like the greatest gift I was ever given. Is that, converts have zeal and passion, and that is something that is, that oftentimes, people who are born into this faith will never experience. And this is what it's going to take to make Islam beautiful and, and amazing. Like what, we're charged with being on the forefront of everything, good. If things were right, Muslims would be, the best of everything. And we're not there, but I think converts can get us there. And you just have to make sure that you're kind to yourself and patient, but invest your time wisely in doing the things that help elevate you, your spirit, your mind, your soul, your sense of goodness, justice, and everything else that kind of undermines that, you can set it aside, and just, it's like anything else. You focus on what is right, and put your time on that.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have that grace with yourself, Grace. And obviously we could sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours about the Quran and all the beautiful ways it has changed and transformed us. And if you're interested in listening to more of what Grace has put out here, please go to their website, usuliinstitute.org, correct?
Usuli.org.
Usuli.org, yeah.
Yeah, usuli.org. And also, and actually there's another website that focuses on my husband's work too, which is also in same methodology, same approach that was in existence before Usuli, but that's at searchforbeauty.org. And again, just the idea that, it's a very simple heuristic. It's like, if it's beautiful, then, God loves beauty. If it's ugly, it cannot be by definition of the divine. So if you see something that is ugly, morally, ethically, that that's not something that is worthy of God, or that God would want for us as human beings. And this is just a very simple way of understanding what can be authentic and not to Islamic practice and Islam.
Right. Easy litmus test for.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. I agree 100%. It is complex, but it is so simple at the same time. So, like most things in life, it has that conundrum to it.
Well, for having me. It's just been really fun.
Absolutely. And we might have to have you back. We opened some cans of worms here in this episode that might need undoing.
Anytime.
Alhamdulillah. And thank you, listeners, for joining us for another podcast episode. Again, if you have any questions about what you've heard, we will have show notes. So there will be resources there to link to the Usuli Institute and their YouTube channel and the searchforbeauty.org, all the beautiful things that they've been doing. And I can say, one of the greatest books I've read in my life that really kind of changed it from being kind of an immature convert to more mature in my thinking was The Great Theft that Professor Abou el Fadl has written. And I highly recommend that book if you want to understand, the framework Islam is being put in this world, unfortunately, right now. Again, we feel blessed to have had Grace Song, the executive director of the Usuli Institute, with us today. And inshallah, we will have many more episodes with her.
Inshallah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And as always, I'm wishing you what is better. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much.